We are live.
Good morning. I'm Antoinette Mosley, the Chair of the Housing and Community Development Committee, and I'd like to welcome you to the September 16th, 2025 remote meeting. All council members and staff are participating virtually. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We're streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by calling 855-925-2801 and using meeting code 9791. Again, for those of you out there with us today, welcome. For today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 9791. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. At this point, speakers will need to press *3 to enter the speaker queue. I will now go through and introduce all the committee members and staff who are participating virtually. Council and staff, as I say your name, please say a quick hello. Councilwoman Sage Turner.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Shanika Smith.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Good morning.
Homeless Strategy Division Manager Emily Ball.
Hey, good morning.
CDBG DR Program Manager Elma King.
Good morning.
Planning and Urban Design Director Steph Dahl.
Hello, everyone.
And Affordable Housing Director Sasha Vertinsky.
Good morning.
At this time, we'll move forward to the first item on our agenda, which is the approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Roll call vote, please. Councilwoman Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye. Yeah.
Myself, aye. It passes unanimously with feline approval. The next item on our agenda is the Asheville Buncombe Continuum of Care update. And here to walk us through is Emily Ball. Take it away, Emily.
Good morning. That was a nice intro. I am glad to be here with you all. Just want to give you a quick update about what's happening in the continuum of care. We have a lot of good motion happening in that body, so just want to keep you in the loop as that's progressing. County commissioners are also hearing quarterly updates about the work of the COC, so just want to be sure that you all are staying informed. A few key takeaways. I think we've had a really thoughtful development of the structure of the COC and all of the COC processes. That has certainly taken time, but has built a strong foundation that's already demonstrating really effective collaborative work. The board has now established a very clear strategic path forward that will guide efforts in the coming years. And through the COC, I think we are beginning to knit individual and organizational actions into a community level response. We haven't had that in the past. That we have very robust and substantive participation in the COC, and that is delivering results as intended. And the COC is really built to encompass all community efforts on homelessness, so not intended to kind of take a particular position, but really wrap arms around everyone's action on homelessness so that we make that collective action for greatest impact. That means that its impact continues to depend on people buying into that model and participating as partners. I think we have that happening now, but just want to remind folks that all are welcome to participate in that. Current overview, we right now have 522 COC members, so really large membership body. Most of those are individuals, 92 are organizations. The threshold for joining as a member is very low. It just means that you're interested in the issue and want to take action to address it. A critical number here is that 86 members, 86 of those 522 are elected to the board or appointed to the board, a committee, or a work group. Some folks are sitting at multiple tables in the COC structure. So that's 86 people that are really contributing a heavy amount of time and investment into this planning body. The board and the membership are both meeting monthly, second Thursday of the month for the board, fourth Thursday for the membership. Both of those meetings are happening in the banquet hall at Harrah's. Both are open to the public. And then our committees and work groups are meeting every 2 weeks. So again, really heavy time investment for community members who are participating in this. We have 5 new board members who joined this summer. Captain Brown with APD is in the public safety seat. You'll recall that the board has a really specific composition. Excuse me. So all of our seats are sector-based. So Captain Brown is in the public safety seat. Mary Brown, who's the pastor at Central United Methodist, is in the faith community seat. Jerry Kivett Kimbrough with the VA is in the standing VA seat. Marcia Mount Shoup at Grace Covenant, and who's also on the Long-Term Recovery Group Steering Committee, is in the community member seat. And then Ella Santos, the new COO at the Housing Authority, is in the Housing Authority seat. And then there are 3 board seats that are vacant right now. Those applications are open until filled. That is a business community representative, a local non-governmental funders representative, and then there are 2 community member seats on the board. Both of those are intended to be folks who represent an organized group of community members. So Rick Freeman was formerly in that seat representing CAN. Rick has moved to Henderson County, so has backed out of his, backed out of his civic obligations here in our community. He really was a critical board member for us in the formation of the COC, but that seat is now vacant. There have been 5 standing committees in the COC established by the charter, and now there is a 6th committee that's just been added. The Community Relations Committee is chaired by Melanie Robertson. They held their first COC event on August 24th. COC Connect, which was at New Belgium, was a resource connection and community fair with member organizations tabling. It was extremely rainy, so a little difficult that afternoon, but great participation, great opportunity for folks to connect with each other. The funding committee is chaired by Brian Methvin. That committee oversees funding processes, managed an RFP and MOU with an RFP process that resulted in an MOU with Goodwill, selected as the fiscal agent for the COC. The funding committee will also oversee the compensation plan for people with lived experience and is currently developing a funding dashboard that I think will be really helpful in transparency and in the community understanding who's paying for what right now, how are we funding the current services available in our community, and then what additional opportunity do we have? Go ahead.
So I'm feeling excited when I see compensation plan for people with lived experience. Do you mean people with lived experience on the board?
Yes. So in May, the board approved, there was a work group focused on developing a compensation plan. It's a long title, compensation plan for subject matter experts with lived and living experience of homelessness. It is the work group shaped this up. It included a number of folks with lived experience, and it is specific to people at this time. The hope is to grow it, but specific to people who are elected to the board or appointed to a committee or work group to compensate the time contributed on those bodies. So it defines who is eligible, like what do we mean by lived experience? What's the compensation rate for meetings? What are the expectations? How does that get handled? Compensation, I think, is a 3-legged stool in the COC. So one is this compensation plan. One is the fiscal agent to handle the compensation. So that's just been established with Goodwill. And then one is a funding source, which we don't yet have. So we have applied for a Dogwood capacity building grant to resource that compensation plan, and expect to hear about that any day now.
Okay, thanks.
The nominating membership committee is chaired by Lance Crawford. That committee manages election and appointment processes for the board, committees, and work groups. And the system performance committee, chaired by a familiar name to you all, Eric Jackson, former city staff, is the chair of that committee. And that group is overseeing HMIS, establishing data governance for us. We haven't really had that in this community until now, looking at data quality and then performance measurement and reporting. The System Planning and Implementation Committee will have a very heavy lift in looking at where there are gaps in services in our community and how to put together interventions that can fill those gaps. Tom Kirkgasser is chairing that committee, and that group was just appointed September 11th, so they will kick off later this fall. And then newly, we had a charter revision process in August that has added a new advocacy committee. So applications are open for that right now. That'll be appointed later this fall. The scope of that group is to put together an advocacy agenda for the COC that the board will approve, and then to implement that advocacy agenda. And then we have 4 work groups that are currently up and running. Work groups will come and go over time, but Dr. Jim Hardy is chairing the Emergency Shelter Development Work Group. That group is developing a plan for new emergency shelter capacity, and has made some provisional decisions. They want to look at 80 non-congregate beds with 50 overflow congregate beds. That's based on a lot of data analysis about utilization in our community right now and where there are still gaps. They're also looking at a multi-agency structural collaboration for operation, thinking that it's too great a lift for a single organization to develop a new shelter at this scale and operate it alone. And so looking at how to bring together multiple organizations for a structural collaboration to make that happen. And then also talking about what Dr. Hardy calls a central nervous system for streamlined access across sites, meaning a way that shelters can identify where there are available beds in other locations to be sure that the person gets to the bed that is the best fit for their particular situation. So some data sharing and infrastructure behind the scenes among shelter providers. So a lot of good work happening in that work group already. Coordinated entry refers to the way that folks are able to access housing when they are homeless, and Paige Weber with Helpmate is chairing that work group. They are redesigning that system right now for how people access those housing interventions with some technical assistance sponsored by HUD. Currently focused on a new vulnerability and housing needs assessment tool and a new prioritization scheme. So identifying, the board ultimately will approve that scheme to identify who is prioritized for what housing intervention. Christian Chambers is chairing the Code Purple work group that is finalizing the plan for Code Purple for this coming season. That plan will be approved by the board in October, and then this work group will continue to meet to oversee implementation, troubleshoot any operational glitches, et cetera. And then Ben Williamson with Asheville Poverty Initiative and 12 Baskets is newly chairing the Homelessness Prevention Work Group. That group has just been appointed last month and will be staffed by a new dedicated position on our team. Sarah Dickerson started with us yesterday in the project manager role for this group, and I'll talk about a bit about that. She will staff this work group, and that work group will be implementing a targeted prevention system through the Right at Home initiative, where we were awarded a planning grant. Yes.
Sorry, can we go back to the emergency shelter development? I want to see if what I'm seeing is what is meant by it. So under where it says 80 non-congregate beds, do we mean 80 in one location? Because when I see multi-agency structural collaboration, that makes me wonder if it's across sites or in one location.
I think we don't know yet.
Okay.
Yep. I think that 80 is based on, they've done a lot of analysis looking at the data that we have available. They have met with a lot of folks who are boots on the ground, first responders. They've met with APD, Sheriff's Office, Fire Department, community paramedics, meeting this week with the folks from ADED, really trying to get a clear picture of the demand and how many beds are needed for folks who are currently unsheltered. Based on all of that work, they have landed on 80 non-congregate, and then with the capacity for 50 overflow congregate, that might look like, still shaping up, but an example might be If there's a kind of large multi-purpose room or dining area where cots could be put out when necessary for a Code Purple event, or I don't know, a natural disaster, for example, having some flex space that can be scaled up when needed. But
And,
I don't yet know if that would be a single site or multiple sites.
and would the helpmate model count as a non-congregate bed in these 80? Like
You
for
mean helpmates new?
well, anyone seeking the service of helpmate, say if like could some of those 89 congregate beds be used for people who are fleeing situations involving
Um,
violence?
I'd say yes and no. So HelpMate, as you know, as I imagine you know, is doubling their capacity right now with their new building. Um, could certainly be. I think if someone was presenting at this location fleeing domestic violence, this operator would want to initially connect them with HelpMate as the best resource for that situation. Could certainly be that HelpMate says we don't have a bed available, and if you have a bed that can be a safe situation for this person, can we go ahead and access that?
Okay, I was trying to get at for whom are those 80 beds, but okay, thanks.
Um, yeah, I think not as specific as people fleeing domestic violence, but just adults who need shelter. Some key actions that have come through the COC. Funding coordination has certainly been a key activity. The COC has been responsible for 13.4 million in awarded funding, and there's 777,000 in pending funding coming through the COC. Some of that is a lot of that is federal money. Some of that just requires a letter of support from the COC. For example, rush funding, which was part of the state's disaster response, requires a letter of support from the COC board. Some of that has been more direct action by the COC, but COC approval coordinating 13.4 million in awarded funding. Establish the compensation plan as we discussed, and Goodwill as the fiscal agent. Goodwill will be able to receive private donations from individuals, manage that compensation plan, and then apply for grants. City will also have a role in applying for grants and holding funds. There will be situations that are more appropriate for us and that are more appropriate for Goodwill. And then some key collaborations have included a dedicated seat on the Downtown Improvements District Steering Committee. The Melina Arrowwood, who is the board chair for the COC, is in that seat. There's a collaboration with the YMCA and AFD Rest to make showers available for folks who are unsheltered. And then currently, the board is coordinating a West Asheville response, recognizing that there's such increased activity in West Asheville right now. So coordinating some additional efforts around that. That at present, that looks like increased outreach, increased needle response, and looking at expanded emergency shelter capacity. So they had some discussion about that at their board meeting last week, continuing to do some work, and then that'll come back to the board again in October. As I mentioned, we have a new staff person on our team who is the Right at Home project manager. So we were awarded a $275,000 planning grant through Right at Home, which is a homelessness prevention initiative. This is a one-year planning process to design a homelessness prevention system with a then 3-year implementation period for that system. The plan that gets developed will be approved by the board and will identify agencies to deliver those services. This is Notably, this is significant private investment in our community because of the effectiveness of the COC structure. So this is a private funder approaching us, seeking to invest in this prevention work because of our COC structure. And then again, adds that funded project manager to our team here in the Homeless Strategy Division. Lastly, the board has adopted a 3-year strategic plan for the COC that was adopted in June. It's based on member input, was developed in a 2-day board retreat. It has 4 objectives, and each objective has strategies and corresponding actions that are assigned to a board member for oversight and assigned to a COC body, mostly committees and work groups for implementation. briefly, those strategic plan objectives are to decrease unsheltered homelessness. That was a clear priority across all input in this planning process. Decrease unsheltered homelessness through increasing utilization of current beds to maximize capacity, expanding emergency shelter capacity, and then supporting service providers. Increasing exits from homelessness to permanent housing by making sure we're using all interventions available and expanding those interventions, and then developing system level housing navigation infrastructure. I think this kind of working as a system is really the shift for us in the community and moving to the COC approach. Third objective is to coordinate and expand homelessness prevention, diversion, and rapid rehousing. So adding capacity to all of those interventions. And then lastly, building housing-focused system capacity. So developing written standards that promote consistency and quality service delivery across the COC, regardless of provider. Developing and implementing an annual COC-wide training plan and COC performance measurement. So again, key takeaways, we got a lot going on. We got a lot of folks invested in this and putting in a lot of time. I think this has been a very thoughtful development process. Feels to me like it is working, like we've got good momentum, good community participation, and are beginning to see results as a result of the COC development process. Happy to answer any questions.
I was going to say, council, any questions for Emily?
Thank you, Emily. Exciting work. I had a question really early on that I saved for the end. The COC membership. I know community members are members. Are council members members? Should we join as members separately, or are we just automatically members?
You're not automatically members. You should join, and
Okay.
I'll be happy to follow up and share that information. Some of you are members. Kim Roney, for example, is appointed to the nominating and membership committee. There's not an expectation that members be seated at committees and work groups, but you're only eligible to be on a committee or work group or the board if you are a member. But joining as a member, includes you in that body of stakeholders, but I think importantly lets you stay really current on information. So lets you receive all the communications, meeting materials, et cetera.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No questions, just a lot of gratitude.
Yes,
Looks like y'all are doing a lot of great work.
this
A lot
is
of ground has been covered.
excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you.
And so we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, number 3, which is the CDBG-DR State of North Carolina Reconstruction MOU. And we'll welcome Elma King to present to us. Elma.
Thank you so much, council members. Good morning. As mentioned, I'm here to discuss the Single Family Home Repair Program subrecipient agreement with the state of North Carolina. Next slide, please, Katie. So the city's CDBG-DR action plan allocated $3 million for single family homeowner repairs, and the city is partnering with the state of North Carolina's Renew NC Rehabilitation and Reconstruction Housing Program to administer home repairs for Asheville homeowners on the city's behalf. The city will reimburse the state for hard construction costs only. And next steps include City Council please authorizing a subrecipient agreement between the city and the state. And I'm here today requesting a recommendation from this committee to move this item forward to Council. Next slide, please, Katie. You all are likely very familiar with these CDBG-DR program area allocations. As you'll see in the housing program area, we've allocated $31 million. Next slide, please, Katie. Of that 31 million, 28 million is set aside for the affordable multifamily housing construction program. And the 3 million is what we're discussing here today regarding the state of North Carolina Reconstruction and Rehabilitation Program. Next slide, please. Renew NC, the Renew NC program that the state is administering is active and live right now. Asheville residents and all Western North Carolina residents can go to renewnc.org to start their application to get their storm damaged home repaired. Next slide, we'll discuss the delivery model. The city has allocated, as mentioned, $3 million to reimburse the state for hard construction costs associated with this program. The state will administer assistance to beneficiaries and act as a subrecipient to the city, involving a phased rollout that prioritizes households earning less than 60% of area median income who have children, elderly, or disabled residents in their home, and then moving forward to other income levels or homes that don't have these children, elderly, or disabled residents in the home. Mitigation is a key component of this program, like repairing and replacing road and bridge access, slope stabilization, and landslide prevention and elevation. And then applicable funding limits are as listed here: $50,000 for rehabilitation activities, and then $375,000 per home for reconstruction. Yes, Vice Mayor?
What's the difference between rehabilitation and reconstruction?
So reconstruction would be anything like fully replacing or reconstructing a home versus small projects to rehabilitate. We understand that it might be that simply if it falls into a beyond $50,000 quote, then it would fall into the reconstruction area.
Okay, thanks.
In terms of delineation of responsibilities, the state will manage day-to-day program operations like fielding and reviewing applications, case management, eligibility determination, environmental reviews, and hiring and directing contractors to perform the work. And the state, as mentioned, will reimburse the state for eligible hard construction costs incurred while implementing the program within Asheville city limits. The city will review and verify all reimbursement requests prior to the distribution of funds, monitor the state to ensure program compliance with all applicable federal regulations, and then prepare and submit quarterly performance reports to HUD as required. Next slide, please, Katie. In terms of next steps, City Council authorizes, we understand that next steps would include City Council authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with the state of North Carolina. The state of North Carolina, which has actually already begun reviewing and approving applicants for assistance, will work with homeowners and contractors to repair and reconstruct Asheville resident homes. And then the city will reimburse the state for those hard construction costs from this CDBG-DR allocation, and then ensure that all program requirements and procedures are followed. Next slide, please. And here I can turn it over to this is our suggested motion for council for committee consideration. I can turn it over to the chair at this point.
Sage?
So just process wise to make sure I'm understanding. So we received money from the state. Now we're going to give it back to the state.
We received money from the federal government, from
Oh,
HUD.
this is the end. Okay, federal.
Yes.
Now we're going to give it to this end. So the Renew NC, I mean, we've heard wonderful things about it, right? It's happening, it's out there, it's live. Is this the only like player in the game, or is there anything to know about that program that we might need a different program, or is this just how it's done? Or
Our understanding, oh,
Go ahead.
please.
Go ahead.
Our understanding is that given that the state has been allocated significantly more funding to do this across the state, we are able to capitalize on that economy of scale by allowing Asheville to be part of that implementation process. And then we are reimbursing given the fact that we received our own allocation from HUD, CDBG-DR funds.
Okay, I guess that helps. I just wonder sometimes if state programs translate as well locally. So I guess I'm a little nervous, but maybe it's just fine. It's just interesting, I guess. But we've never been through this before, so I imagine it will be interesting. Thank you.
Alma, do you know if Renew NC can be utilized to tear down damaged homes?
Mm-hmm.
I believe that is the case, but I will have to get back to you on that specifically.
Okay. Council, any more questions? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement with the State of North Carolina Department of Commerce Division of Community Revitalization to provide repair and reconstruction for Asheville homeowners who were affected by Tropical Storm Helene, and that city council authorized city manager to sign all necessary documents to this effect.
Second.
Okay, I'll now do a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Turner,
Aye.
Myself, aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much, Elma.
Thank you, council members, very much.
And up next on the agenda, item number 4 is the HCD scope discussion on anti-displacement strategies and UDO amendments. Sasha and Stephanie will kick us off.
Thank you so much, Chair Mosley. My name is Steph Munzendahl, and I'm the Planning and Urban Design Director for the City of Asheville. And as you mentioned, Sasha Vertinsky is here to help us with any detailed questions. We're presenting some slides to you today for the purposes of allowing you to facilitate discussion amongst yourselves about the city's approach to anti-displacement. Katie, next slide. In this presentation, we'll go over some operational definitions for the term displacement. These are pulled from the city's affordable housing plan that is quite recent. We'll also talk about what kind of framework we use when we approach anti-displacement efforts and the need to address both housing supply and the ability to keep residents in their homes. We'll give an example or two of how we're coordinating some of those strategies from both the missing middle and the affordable housing plan. And then for discussion, we will provide you with some data just so you can see a little bit of what's going on in our area regarding where housing is being planned or produced in our own community. Next slide. So we have definitions for 4 different kinds of displacement. Physical displacement is the one that we lean on the most when we do our city work. And that is the type of displacement where people cannot stay in their homes because a landlord chooses not to renew their lease, they evict them, a property is demolished. There's also physical well, let me go on to the next one. Economic displacement is when existing residents are priced out of housing in their community, whether due to increases in rents, property taxes, insurance costs, or otherwise. And actually, I want to correct myself. I really think that economic displacement is the one that most folks think about when they're thinking about displacement. But we do, you just heard this conversation on home repairs. So I thought physical displacement was something that we should definitely connect with here. Cultural and social displacement happens when residents feel like they no longer belong in their own communities. This happens when new residents' preferences are prioritized and businesses, institutions that once maybe served the legacy residents are also priced out from the area. And environmental displacement, we experienced some of that fairly recently with Tropical Storm Helene. That is a loss of housing due to a natural disaster or climate-related issues. For any of these, there is both an opportunity for that kind of displacement to either be temporary or permanent. Do you all have any questions about these definitions? We'll move on. Next slide. So it is a balancing act. So what we've learned from all of the different studies and best practices, research across the country, and what we've heard from our community is we really want to make sure that we're pairing growth efforts to accommodate growth in our community with efforts to accommodate like people staying in their homes. And sometimes there's a tension between those two. And so looking at ways to identify where residents are most vulnerable to being displaced for economic reasons is part of our approach, and you'll see that moving forward. Next slide. So a few notes about the affordable housing plan. Its primary goals, the top 3 you see here, they're really like promoting policies and resources that help people stay, these are the anti-displacement pieces, preserving existing affordable housing, that naturally occurring affordable housing, but also improving housing quality through programs like home repair, and increasing the supply that meets the diverse needs of current and future residents. Those are all things, even increasing the supply, as long as it's increasing the supply of diverse types of housing that can help people stay in place. And so we also have a goal to align our place-based policies and programs, and that might be things like zoning or investments in certain districts, like for infrastructure, with related city initiatives for affordable housing. And then we want to broaden and strengthen the affordable housing ecosystem. That speaks to a lot of the work that Sasha and her team have been doing to develop a pipeline to make sure that we have great funding strategies moving forward. And there's even some sub goals in there around like rental registries and all of that. So what's key is that the approach to affordability here in Asheville requires that we coordinate these efforts, the efforts to expand housing production with concurrent efforts to keep existing residents in their homes. Next slide. So 2 examples of things we're doing right now, a concurrent effort. The first is that we are proposing as staff a small change to our ADU regulations. That change would allow, instead of an 800 square foot ADU, a 1,000 square foot ADU. So it seems like, well, that's pretty small, but we found that that's a real sweet spot for people who need to have family, so people who actually have children. And it's also more in line with existing building standards. Another thing we're looking at with this proposed ADU change is to make it easier for people who have existing structures in their backyard, like an old carriage house or a garage, or maybe they're able to convert and do an attached ADU above their garage, easier for them to move through the development process. And what I mean specifically by that is that there's one little small thing generally with our setback standards, where everyone who had a non-conforming house built before we had our current zoning standards would have to go to the Board of Adjustment to get their ADU approved. We have found that they have an actual hardship in every single case. So we are recommending that we remove that, change the ordinance so that's no longer a piece of the process. So ADUs are something that we saw in Missing Middle, and even recommendations in the Affordable Housing Plan, that are really great hyper-local solutions in people's own neighborhoods. This is something that is more accessible to lower income folks who aren't professional developers tend to choose these kind of pathways to creating new housing. We did already have one online information session about this proposed amendment. And on Thursday of this week, I think that's September 18th, at the East Asheville Library from 6 to 8 p.m., we'll have an in-person meeting, and we're hoping that folks turn up, come on out and talk to our staff. We'll have translation for Spanish language and childcare available. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you, Katie. Oh, I think we skipped one. Yes, excellent. So here's an example of how we pair those regulatory changes that can help with our growth and expanding the diversity of our housing supply with something that helps keep residents in place. Home repair investments. So Sasha is leading up a partnership with Archer, and I had memorized what that stood for before this presentation and have now forgot it. Sasha, can you pipe in and
sure. It's the Asheville Regional Coalition for Home Repair.
Perfect.
And it includes mountain housing, habitat, community action opportunities, ABCLT, and Poderima.
Perfect. And so we have $1.465 million of 26 bond funds allocated to this program. $750,000 is already contracted with Archer and underway for storm related repair. And then in addition to that, we have another $1 million of, yes, Chair Mosley.
I guess this question is for Sasha. How do we land on 1 million instead of 3 million?
I see. Well, it's part of that the bond strategy I presented to you all last Tuesday. You know, it's kind of a projected number. It's not, you know, in stone at this point. It's just kind of what we think is the appropriate number given the other demands for bond dollars, home ownership and rental housing, those kind of things.
When will we be discussing the bond and the allocations?
Well, so last Tuesday was the first step, kind of allocating the first part of it to the, you know, the Affordable Housing Loan Fund. And then our plan for the remaining 10 million is to bring things kind of in steps. So we will be doing some things this fall, starting to work on a home repair policy that would kind of guide some of this use of these remaining funds. And then, you know, the other piece that would probably come before you would be anything having to do with moving money from bonds to the housing trust fund. And I guess the answer is I'm not totally sure, but it would be either like this winter, I would say, that we would be looking at that. Just looking at staff capacity and kind of how we're rolling different things out.
Because I feel like, Sage, you want to say something. Yeah.
Well, I know, I mean, that has come up. It sounds like we're going to get to it where there is potentially discussion around making sure we have some money available in the Housing Trust Fund for local projects instead of just the larger loan group. But I think, you know, there's a few people have brought that up. So it will come up at some point. I think that's on your radar.
Okay.
The other thing I was going to mention, so the Home Consortium is also layering in home repair. Now that's of course greater counties, but just to make sure you're aware of what's being talked about, but you are. Okay, great.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, you know, Alma just talked about the state home repair program. So, you know, these dollars we set aside have been for storm, or the 750,000 we're under contract with is really storm related. And the state program is storm related home repair or home reconstruction. Now, if you had, I don't know if I almost said this, but if you had basement damage from the storm, their job, and you get accepted into this program and the state's helping you out, maybe with some city funds in there, they will make sure your whole home, I believe, make sure your entire home is up to code. So there might be some other pre-existing damages to your home that also get included into that repair. So we also hope that people are taking advantage of that state program as well. And I believe it's been pretty well subscribed. You know, people have been applying from the city as well. So.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, Steph.
Okay, we're gonna go to the next slide and start talking about data. So looking at data is an important part of our way of helping do policy analysis for you all. It's a great important piece for you all to think about what you might want to talk to staff about as priorities for upcoming years. And so today we're just sharing some select data, including permit data that was collected from March 2021 to September 1st of this year. It's about a 4.5 year time frame. And we selected that to be consistent when we talk about permits. And we selected that because before March 2021, the city didn't have a very accurate way of tracking accessory dwelling units. That's just a technical issue. So more data is going to be shared at future meetings, and based on your reaction today and some input, we'll talk about how we can support Ben bringing some of that to you. So let's look at the next slide. This first slide talks about which areas are geographically most vulnerable to displacement. So it's not the areas that are vulnerable to displacement. They're going to stay exactly where they are, but it's the residents in those areas. And what you're looking at is a map where kind of the purple areas, those blue areas, that is what we call the 7F parcels. Those are parcels that staff did an analysis based on missing middle data to show where folks had database characteristics where that might be income, education levels, tenureship in homes. It may have been that the sales price for homes showed that the area had already gone through gentrification or not. These areas were deemed to have residents that were most vulnerable to displacement. And what we did in this slide was overlay in pink the federally designated opportunity zones. And most folks remember that being created in 2017. Those are also database characteristics, and it's a federal program where folks who are looking to make private investments also get an incentive to basically minimize their capital gains. Any questions about this slide?
Yeah. So because I don't see streets and I'm not good with just like
Okay, sure.
the center part. So are you saying the original blue ones, blue areas would have been those areas that were included in the last flag lot
Mhm. Yeah, thank you.
discussion we
Yeah.
had? And then the rest is opportunity zones, which were requested but not included in the flag lot discussion. So that's
Correct. So
okay.
you'll see it's, yes, that's exactly correct.
And then also help me see where Cox Avenue, or what used to be in my mind, South Side, that we
Mhm.
now consider downtown, is that included but in the opportunity zone portion?
It
So
is.
that's like Hilliard south to Cox.
Mhm. So if you're looking at this map, you'll see in the middle of it, that's downtown where it says Asheville. That part of it is really the historic core of downtown, the northern section, and everything that's in the pink below that, that's kind of below Hilliard. And you can see the yellow line, that street right there, that's basically Southside Ave cutting across. So Cox, the south part, the northern part of Cox Avenue is not in an opportunity zone. That the yellow line crossing right underneath the ash, that's Patton Avenue. But the southern part of it is. And then you can see that again, like anything west of McDowell Street there, that's in the darker blue and purple. That's a lot of the south side, and part of their, they're like the parent to the South French Broad community. So it includes some of that. And all of the East End is included in mostly the opportunity zone and designated as a 7F. So as you noted, the newer regulations that make it easier to do flag lots and small cottage developments do not apply in those areas that are either blue, because some of those areas are outside of opportunity zones, or purple.
Okay. I think. Sage.
Steph, I know when we were going through this conversation earlier, gosh, I guess this year, I think, did we make a GIS layer that could be shared out so folks like council members could zoom in?
Absolutely. We have an ArcMap viewer. You can even put in certain addresses, and we can share that after this meeting if you want to go back.
That'd be great. Antoinette, that'll let you just be like, this exact house, this exact street.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Okay, Steph.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. So again, we're just kind of look at patterns and seeing if we can detect any. These are where accessory dwelling units have already been approved. And as I noted, the data before 2021 is incomplete. So this is pretty much for 4.5 years. The city has approved 116 of these structures. 73 of those are detached and 43 of those are attached, like a granny flat or something like that. And I think staff notes that we also put what we call again the 7F parcels, which are the parcels where people who have the data characteristics of being more vulnerable to displacement live. We put those in there so you can see that it's kind of a wide variety. It looks like to me that in the Montford, historically like Stumptown area, there's several ADUs in there. And then there's ADUs spread out throughout neighborhoods. We haven't done an analysis of this, but we're really interested in looking at the proximity to transportation corridors for some of these developments. Councilwoman Turner.
Just real quick, I know we keep saying we didn't have great data before 2021. I know I was involved in AHAC for many years ahead of that. And I remember even like Ben, when he was in DSD, coming to talk to us about it. But I remember, and maybe this is flawed data as you've discovered after, but we were saying an average of 14 to 15 ADUs a year. So if we're doing, that's more like 30, these numbers. So that would be great. And possibly either bad original data or in response to some of the changes we made, which I think is a really great thing.
Yeah, I think you're seeing some development shifts about what is being produced over time. So we'd be happy to look back at that, maybe see if there's a story to tell there.
Yeah, it's interesting when, don't you have plenty on your plate. I just want to share a little side note. Don't need to
And
study more.
real quick, Councilman Turner, just to confirm, yeah, the previous data was not very accurate because we didn't have an ADU permit type. So it literally involves staff going in and searching comments on a permit to try to find ADUs. So I don't know how much we can rely on old data for ADUs, and I haven't been in DSC a while, but presumably we've got a better system for tracking those permits now.
Okay, let's look at the next slide. So here we wanted to take a look at our larger projects, the projects that come to City Council and usually are multifamily with a lot of residential units that help to fill the gap for us both. Usually that's for rental housing. Again, this is really happening all over the city, and we are seeing that they happen a lot around our corridors, our transportation corridors. But I think the more interesting part is that y'all have approved almost 6,000 multifamily units in the past 4.5 years. And that doesn't even include projects that have gone through a conceptual review process like Aspire or Ferry Road, which were very large projects. But the kicker is that just under 25% of these have shown any signs of moving forward with the city's development process. So whether that is because they don't have the funding, they realize that they needed something that they just can't move forward with the project. We don't have data on that. But what this is really suggesting is that you are approving a lot of housing. It's not getting built.
So when I look at this, what I believe I'm looking at is a map that shows most of the projects we've approved have been in areas more vulnerable to displacement.
That there are usually, and I wish this map were a little bit more clear, they are on the edges of those areas. And what you're seeing in that middle section as a reminder, like the little icons, a lot of those are in the like central business district area, very close to the central business district. So it's there is a yes, and many of our more vulnerable areas, and this is something we have to work on or look at our policies and see how we can tailor them really well to this. Many of our more vulnerable areas are also the areas that are closest to our transportation network, like our transit corridors, right? So we actually normally want to incentivize housing production on transportation corridors. And we do, you guys have passed some policy that supports that, but that doesn't mean that those aren't also very close to vulnerable neighborhoods.
So I'm all, because this didn't just happen, there's a history to this, right? So there's a reason certain folks lived in what we used to call the inner city, right? And there's a reason transportation only went to certain portions of the city.
Sure.
And now that we're older and wiser, we've decided that we want to live and work close to those centers. The unintended consequence, using our language, leads to economic, social, and cultural displacement. So during the meeting when we discussed building on corridors, I believe that's why legacy neighborhood members, they instinctively and intuitively understood what this very map is showing us. So I just want to put that out there. So it's not a matter of folks not wanting housing. It's a matter of folks saying, if you build this here, we're likely to experience social and cultural displacement. I'll hand it back to you, Stephanie.
Thank you. So one note I'll say before we get Councilwoman Turner's question or comment in here is there's a secondary piece of data that we have not finalized here that I think is really important. And that is that this makes a ton of sense. If the city actually puts money into one of these conditional zoning projects because of affordability, it's more likely to be built. And to your point, what you were just talking about, if we want to support people not being displaced, one of the strategies we can really look at is higher incentives for affordability in these areas that are close to where people are vulnerable to displacement. So if we are putting multifamily, we can also look at smaller thresholds for multifamily, but there is a way for us to look at tailoring these two things together. As we noted, we want to pair our ability to have housing options and diverse housing types with strategies to help keep people in the neighborhoods.
I would modify what you said just very slightly. Instead of incentives for affordable, I would say more incentives for more deeply affordable.
Deeply affordable.
And then also, when you showed the map, and you and I've had this conversation, I wonder, because the neighborhoods are asking for, and I hate to use this language, the overlay. So no, that's what I mean, but that's not what I'm saying. I wonder if, as we do in with every development that comes before us, or really anything we vote on, staff gives us the pros and the cons. I wonder if we could have a section that says this particular development scores high on the vulnerability index for displacement. And then, of course, we as a body do with that what we do with that, or P&Z will do with that what they decide to do with that. But I think sometimes people get caught unaware because there's no real knowledge of how these things are connected, and then it kind of freezes people. But I think if a developer realizes that where it is trying to build is in one of these areas, maybe they would operate differently because they know we are going to be looking at that as well. Does that?
Yeah, I appreciate you. This is exactly what we wanted you guys to talk about with each other, especially, which is how do you want to use data to make your policy decisions? That's certainly, and so I think that that's, again, to just, get more input from you all like that on how you want to see data used. When staff does an analysis, we are happy to be able to respond to that.
And I feel like Sage has been waiting to ask her question, so sorry. Go ahead.
No worries. I was just wondering if there is a GIS layer for this map that we might be able to look at. And I'm curious if you all are considering doing any outreach to the 75% of projects that haven't moved to see if there's any kind of universal theme. I mean, I know anecdotally it's financing, and interest rates, et cetera, lending packages, all of it. The whole capital stack is in jeopardy. But I'd be curious to know if we could get the data. I mean, I'd be curious enough to actually make phone calls if it helped. But is there any interest in that? Are you guys thinking about doing that, or? Because it kind of ties to this. Like, if the answer is most projects are getting built if they have some subsidy and everyone comes back with that's the problem, is that a different conversation? Or, why is
Right.
there to build?
Yeah, I think we're going to have some of those conversations once we looked at this list. We're now just kind of anecdotally sharing what we know about the different projects. That's where we're at right now with it.
Well, and I'd love just to be able to zoom in because I'm just kind of curious.
This is also on an ArcGIS, like a.
It is. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we can share a lot of this with the public, with you all. Okay, next slide. So we talked about the big projects. This is a graph to talk about smaller projects and specifically single family homes. Again, it's for 4.5 years, but what you can see here and think about the larger macroeconomic environment, March 2021, what was special about that time? Well, in December, January, we started getting COVID vaccines. People started getting back to normal. And by March 2021, you were seeing a little bit of a permit surge. Certainly, the lending environment was very different for 4.5 years ago as far as interest rates. But you see a pretty steady trend line of, 8 to 13 permits. These are showing the permits that were actually constructed. So what we did is we said if a permit, what you're seeing there is what permits were pulled in March 2021 to build a single family home that actually went through with it. You're seeing in the last year or more a real slowdown in the homes that have actually been built, and that probably is connected with financing again. Now, there's a little bit of a lag on the tail end of our data where, of course, those numbers are going to change. If a permit that was pulled in March of 2025 actually goes and gets built tomorrow, that will change slightly. But single family home production, I think that one of the takeaways with this is that it's somewhat constant in the past several years, but it's really not, it's not something that by itself is going to solve our housing issue. Any comments or questions on this one?
I have one. Kind of like we were talking about the ADU data being kind of incorrect and looking through comments and permits and stuff earlier. Are we doing anything to prep our system to differentiate between a new construction house or a Helene tear down rebuild? So that we can look at this data going into the future without the Helene replacement kind of effect.
Yeah, what a great question. I'll have to ask Mark Matheny and the folks that are working on our new permitting system that we're hoping to transition to next year. That's a great question. We might be able to differentiate that data right now.
Maybe. Okay. I guess I just wonder because, our big housing study, I think it said we need 5,200 single family homes. And I actually think that's an underrepresented number because our housing stock is so expensive that it can't be afforded by so many and, alter the demand. But I mean, we're just never going to get there like this.
Sure. I do, and just to getting back, I do know that there are notes on our permitting system that flag if this is a storm-related repair or reconstruction. So I'm pretty sure that we can untangle some of this and also check the data.
Yeah, just so you don't have to search comments later.
Yeah, I will say with housing data, what Sasha and I talked about this past week was just that, there are a lot of different, we're showing you permit data for a reason, and it's because it's the data we control. And there's a lot of, you guys heard the Bowen report. There's a lot of data out there about like the average or the median price for homes in this quarter. And you're going to see that based on the region or based on the city. And it's reported out in different places. But this permit data, we're trying to show you on a hyper local level what's going on.
I want to share one aside because my watch has been updating me this throughout this conversation, which I find ironic. I follow Zillow and I set up a search a long time ago for houses under $300,000. And I've been getting updates. I'm just encouraging others to maybe try this and turn it on. Since we've been meeting, I've gotten 2 updates that 2 houses on Asheville's market right now dropped their price below 300. So I'm seeing a wave, but I want to point it out because I think you guys might enjoy that data, receiving it. It's just fascinating to watch prices coming down. We used to watch and count how many were for sale under 300, and it just kind of disappeared over time. And as it comes down, it's an opportunity. So random insertion, but I'm getting the updates, and I wanted you guys to consider getting them too.
All right, thank you. Let's go to the next slide. And so this is just a little bit of a heat map to show you of all those homes in the 4.5 years where you're seeing that housing production. So if it feels like, you got a stronger color of purple somewhere, where those dots are more dense together, you see a lot in West Asheville, definitely out by Beaverview, Johnson School Road, everything that's north of Patton Avenue. This is a little bit different from where you're seeing the multifamily. Any questions about this? We'll go to the next slide. Okay, and so at this time, we just wanted to thank you for having us come here today to bring you the approach that we're using to balance the needs for increased housing diversity and supply with efforts to keep people in their homes. And if you have additional questions, things that we could follow up on, I definitely know the map viewer are for some of this data with 2 things that I will follow up on those 2 different map viewers.
So when we were talking about incentivizing, I'm wondering if it's counterintuitive to incentivize to not build next to vulnerable areas, but does that get us away from our building on corridor discussion?
So big picture, I'm going to say that I want to talk about the plan to update the UDO. And in general, we are right now putting together a funding package. We're going to be sharing with you all the roadmap to updating that UDO pretty soon through council committees. Yeah, we're excited. We're going to be working with Planning and Zoning Commission to kick off their understanding of that roadmap in November. So when we talk about different strategies like that, about incentivizing folks to build in specific areas, what we're hoping is that that type of thought process really gets embedded in our UDO update. Right now, what we have are a lot of recommendations from existing studies like Missing Middle and the Affordable housing plan that we know that we want to work with you all to implement. And a lot of that is just saying, for example, you know, duplexes, townhomes, triplexes, those things are still not allowable uses in most of our like RS2, 4, and 8 zoning districts, and have a conversation about if those are tweaks that we can make before their implementation pieces of policy that we've already looked at and researched. If that is something that we can do moving forward before we do an overhaul of the actual unified development ordinance, that might be a pathway for having some of those discussions. In particular, it won't be until next fiscal year where we actually kick off with a consultant who's able to do a lot of those other analyses. And I'll say create more bespoke ordinances that are specific to our geography and our residents. And I hear an interest in that. So I'm going to bring it back to my staff and say what we have right now and how that aligns with existing policy, that when we might be able to do some small tweaks.
And what about the addition or the vulnerability discussion on developments that come to us, or an analysis, I guess is a better way to put it, from staff?
Yeah, I think we're looking,
something-
it's not, that could probably be a simple thing for us to do. And it would be interesting to get input from, you know, a larger group of city council on what that, you know, what that analysis might want to include, what you might want to have in it. So I'm hearing from you in particular that you're wanting to see information about proximity to a development. When something comes, I'm assuming like a conditional zoning to council, it might have a better picture in the beginning of where this proposed development is. And that would be for you all, right? But that you're also asking us something different, which is how do we let developers know, that's the incentive thing, that we would prefer them to build in certain places?
Well, I'm not even going to say prefer. I'm going to say,
Okay.
you know, what, because they might have reasons for wanting to build one place over another, but maybe kind of an evening out of the playing field is what I was thinking for incentivizing. I don't want to put colleagues on the spot because I'm the only one talking about having this analysis in our papers. If that's something that no one else is interested in, you know, I'm happy to hear that now. Or if others are interested, I'm happy to hear that. Or if you want to think about it and we talk about it later, I'm open to that too. Any discussion on this last particular portion?
I'm trying to understand what the analysis will consist of, because you're speaking about putting in the staff notes, or you're speaking of it to have a conversation with developers beforehand.
Well, I'm talking about the staff note. And so if I understood Steph correctly, she was saying, basically, Antoinette, you're the only one who seems to be interested in having the staff note. It's something that we would need to hear from other council members to see if you too would be interested in those staff notes.
I'll share an example. Councilwoman Smith, for our TRC reports and sometimes for planning and zoning, we do provide an analysis like of the demographics of the area. So we just mostly use census data to help people, because we can't make land use decisions based on that data unless we have ordinances that are based on that data. But just like we use maps to give people an idea of where, like this is next to a school, we also include a block that says this is in an area where people make about 67, on average, 67% of the average median income. This is an area where 10% of the people are Spanish speaking. This isn't an area where people are overwhelmingly over 55 years old. And it helps us just better understand the area that we're planning in or that we're doing plan review in. And so that is one of the reasons why I'm asking, is just that that's the kind of data that we are using. I'm wondering if that's the kind of data that you all are interested in, or if you're interested in something quite different.
What I was thinking was we already have the missing middle study that has its own displacement vulnerability maps in it,
Mhm.
right? And so I'm wondering if when things come to us, we can get a flag that says this is near or in what our study shows to be a high vulnerability area. Yeah, Ben.
I didn't want to cut you off, Vice Mayor, so if
Please
you
do.
want to finish your thought.
No, go ahead,
Okay.
please.
I was going to make a suggestion. I think, provided that the rest of the committee, which you asked that, Vice Mayor, if this sounds like something that you want to pursue, what I may would suggest is then, if that's the case, let us bring back, Steph, your team could bring back maybe some structure or thoughts around what that displacement vulnerability analysis could look like. And we could check in with HCD to make sure we're on track. And if that's something that's going to be useful, then maybe with HCD's endorsement, we could then move it forward and make sure full council's aware of that. So, I mean, I think, Steph, it's probably something that the planning staff can figure out and probably bring back some options to this committee for what that
Yeah,
could look like.
you're spot on. We actually already do it, whether it's formally for TRC or informally. So
Okay, that sounds great. And thanks for interrupting me, Ben. That was perfect.
Can I just add to it? I was trying to gain some understanding about where you were going with the analysis, and I agree with it, but I was thinking about a historical context. Like this area in the last 10 years has endured a lot of regulatory changes, and this is the result, intended or unintended. And over that 10-year span, it'll give them a lot of information as to whether they want to continue with that type of development or if it was going to invoke more vulnerability.
I love that.
now
Council,
that I'm going to need to think about. That's a different kind of analysis, but I certainly, this is exactly the kind of input we wanted on the larger discussion for what data do you need to be able to understand and make, informed decisions. And if that's what you need, we're going to work on it.
and then a question, where are we um, in regards to the request from Legacy Neighborhoods regarding their map proposals that they sent? Is that not something that's going to happen until we do the overarching UDO changes?
So I'm trying to, can you clarify what that request is? We do keep in touch with them quite often, and we have a lot of questions back and forth, but I'm not sure I know exactly what you're speaking of.
So there was a time when Legacy Neighborhoods came forward and they gave a suggestion about a map for what they were calling an overlay. We didn't move forward with that. Instead, we did kind of a piecemeal map when we did the flag lot and cottages vote that included a portion of what they requested. So my question is, where are we? Because that was just in a subsection of our UDO. I believe their request was for those maps to be throughout the UDO. So my question is, where are we with that?
Okay, I'm gonna return to your next meeting or do a follow-up email for that because I don't have the exact answer for you right this moment.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thanks for that.
And I'll say specifically, I'll need to find the data or that request. I do recall a proposal from a private citizen, two different private citizens, but one private citizen in particular who was working with the legacy neighborhoods. And I'm not sure if that's the proposal you mean. And that's why I just want to make real sure.
Yeah, when we're offline, I'll show you the email.
Perfect.
that representatives of the legacy neighborhood sent with
Right.
the desired map. I'm happy to do that for you.
Thank you.
Sage.
Thank you. So first, I absolutely still support this whole map layer, overlay, whatever it shall become. And I do believe there's still a majority support on council. But what I really raised my hand to say is in talking about displacement, Councilwoman Smith's comment made me think even further. So, God, not to open a whole nother book, but urban renewal, what we lost, what was lost. So if we're going to start talking about anti-displacement strategies to further prevent social or cultural displacement, physical displacement, et cetera, perhaps the conversation also needs to include how do we replenish? How do we replace? So if we're talking like, we're looking at development patterns and if a particular neighborhood is feeling socially or culturally displaced because there's so much new activity in their area. Frankly, we may never be able to stop activity and growth in the city. So how we do it is going to become more important than if we can do it. And it makes me wonder if replacement is part of the conversation that we're not even having yet. Like, let's say I know we lost a series of grocery stores. How do we bring them back? Do we bring them back? Does that ease some of the cultural displacement and also start with restoration? Because I don't ever see us kind of weaving that layer in, and I'm just kind of planting a seed because
I'm so glad you said that because I was having a conversation with someone not from here, but learned that perhaps CDBG DR dollars could be used for a grocery store or so.
It's really interesting.
Mhm.
It just makes me wonder if, we're in a shrinking piece of land. We don't have annexation. We have this kind of like, growth boundary for lack of better words, but we're going to run out of land. So if we're going to keep growing as a city, which is impossible to stop, how do we recreate what's been lost? And it might just mean that development strategy is replacing some of what's been taken away and the communities are smaller, but they're intact more or something. I don't know. I'm just kind of speaking up, top of my head right now, but it almost seems incomplete if we just try to prevent further displacement without restoring what's been lost. Does that make any sense? Just
It
thinking
totally
about
does.
it.
It totally does. And I love that. Interestingly, and this has nothing to do with the development we do, but it relates to social districts, in particular, South Slope. And I was out and a few members from the South Side community were upset, not so much because of the social districts, I guess, but because they hadn't been included. Because to them, we're making a change in an area that for them is their neighborhood. And they're not being considered. It's as if while they're happy for the business owners and happy to do something to have the business owners earn, they're wondering why.
Where's my business? Yeah.
But when there's a marker that says there were 1,200 houses and businesses here, and they were removed, and they're going, basically, how do we fit in here? How do we benefit? They're benefiting from our removal. How do we take part in that? And so that's a conversation I guess we'll have later, Sage, because I hear you saying, how do we replace?
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you, Stephanie. I believe this was a great conversation. Does council have any more questions or comments?
I just really want to compliment our planning director right now. I can't remember how many years you've been in your seat now, but you're kicking butt. Like, this is great work. This is great work that I feel like council has been speaking to for a long time, and you're doing a great job. So thank you for all of you working on this. But, we have a fairly new planning director, and I think this is wonderful. Thank you.
Well,
I know you brought this expertise to the table when you were, coming to this position, and it's been an awesome thing to have.
I just want to say thank you, but also note that we have an amazing team. The staff throughout the city rocks. And you all rock too, since we're having a love fest. Thank you.
Ben?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Yes, Sage, completely agree. Steph is doing a lot of great work in her team, and there's so many things going on in this city right now. It's so busy. But Vice Chair, if you don't mind, just and maybe can we summarize maybe what we want to kind of our next steps out of this agenda item? I have two things written down, so I just want to,
Please do.
I guess, confirm those, and you can tell me if I'm off. So one was staff will follow up with a framework for a displacement and vulnerability analysis, and that framework could presumably be added to like staff reports or part of the information we bring to advisory boards, committees, and councils. The second thing I heard was, and I'm going to call this a framework too, is at least at the next HCD, we'll have a discussion on the legacy neighborhoods overlay framework. And that is the idea of a map. And I think that would be a map that would be unique to each legacy neighborhood. I think I've heard a majority of HCD committee members in support of both those follow-up items. Is that accurate?
I think so. And then I'll follow because there was some opportunity zone portion in there too. So I'll send that to Steph when I find it. But I think that's perfect, Ben. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Council, you agree?
I do, and I think don't we lose OZs soon? Like they only had a term. They're not as pressing as they used to be, right?
My understanding is that there's two versions of that legislation, and that I think the next one it expires in 2028. There's an overlap year, but it's likely that they can renew that.
I'm sorry, I zoned out for a second. Which legislation were you talking about?
We're just talking about
Opportunity
opportunity
zones.
They
zones.
are permanent. I did look this up while y'all were talking about it like a half hour ago. They are permanently extended by the big beautiful bill.
Oh,
Oh,
I didn't notice that. Yeah.
I have a different term for that bill, but
I think that's what, yeah.
Shouldn't be trying to get in with something?
I had an afterthought. Steph, you mentioned tenure-based data. I didn't know if that was something that we should suggest you add, or if it was layered in one of your frameworks.
It is layered in.
I'm so disappointed by that OZ news.
Well, okay, I think we have the action items. Anything else on this one? Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Ben. And thank you, Sasha, for this one. And we'll move to the final item on our agenda, which is public comment. Do we have any callers in the queue?
Yes, we do. Just one moment. Caller ending in 0840. Your line is now open. You will have 3 minutes. Oh, sorry, sir. Just 1 second. We seem to have technical issues. Just one moment. Okay, caller, could you try one more time, please?
Good morning, Chair and members of HCD. My name is Sekou Coleman, speaking for the Legacy Neighborhoods Coalition, which includes Burton Street, East End, Valley Street, Emma, Shiloh, and Southside. Thank you for today's discussion on displacement. We appreciate staff and committee members naming that displacement is not only physical removal, it also shows up as economic pressure, cultural and social loss, and environmental risk. Clear and consistent definitions give everyone a common language, and we encourage the adoption and consistent use of these definitions in staff reports and committee deliberations. I'm calling with 3 comments for today. First, where growth goes matters. And so we ask the city to steer most added density to lower risk, higher income areas that have historically resisted growth. In vulnerable neighborhoods, pair any added density with concrete protections. Examples include home repair and weatherization, property tax relief for income qualified long-term owners, eviction diversion and tenant supports, and community land tools that keep homes affordable over time. These investments help long-term residents remain and thrive. Second, as a complement to what you discussed today, consider a practical displacement index or score as an internal analytic tool. We understand a score by itself may not create a legal basis to approve or deny a project, Yet even so, it can highlight where proposals are more likely to cause displacement and can inform early dialogue about location, design, and mitigation. LNC is ready to contribute neighborhood knowledge and lived examples that can make the tool useful in practice. Third, on the downtown economic activation package, including a possible social district, we support recovery and small business vitality, and we also need better engagement and communication with legacy communities before any approval. Many residents along downtown's borders with East End and South Side have concerns about spillover impacts and neighborhood livability. LNC have not been formally engaged by proponents, and with a council vote anticipated in October, we ask that legacy neighborhoods be meaningfully brought into the conversation first. And last, very encouraged by the discussion around replacing what was lost, and would welcome the opportunity to be part of that discussion moving forward to ensure that we have a more vibrant community. Thank you for your work and effort.
Thank you, caller. Next caller in the queue, caller ending in 5702. Your line is now open and you will have 3 minutes. Caller ending in 5702. Can you hear us? Hello, caller, can you hear us? Let me try to reload our site and see what is going on. Caller ending in 5702. Can you hear us?
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you. You
Hi.
will have 3 minutes.
Great. Thank you, committee members. This is Andy Barnett with Asheville Area Habitat for Humanity. I'm really grateful for the discussion today around displacement. I'm noticing that I think it was almost this time last year, council had a work session around displacement. I think it might have been the last thing, formal action before the storm. So I'm really excited to see this committee pick this back up. I want to point to one thing that hasn't been mentioned in this discussion so far. We've talked about the incentive programs that we have around affordable housing production and housing production generally. We've talked about land use, but we really haven't talked about specific programs that the city could invest in to create guardrails around displacement pressures. The previous caller mentioned a few of them, things like property tax relief and eviction diversion, things like neighborhood placemaking, and the kind of discussion you were having about maintaining existing community institutions, but also reinvesting in community institutions that have been lost or at risk of being lost to mitigate the community and economic displacement pressures. I would extend that to investments into the capacity of community-based development organizations and community groups that can help to organize and direct investment and development and envision things like small area plans to guide development practices in their communities. We have far fewer tools at the city level to invest in these kinds of programs than we have to invest in the development of housing. So we really need to balance our investment into the guardrails for development as we think about how we want to shape our community. Thank you.
That is the last caller that raised their hand to speak in the queue, but let me just reload to double check. We don't have any new callers. Okay, Madam Chair, that is all the callers we've had that have asked to speak.
Okay, well, thank you. Any more comments from council? If not, great meeting, and we are adjourned.